What did you do today, Olivier? How can I imagine your everyday life as a zoo curator?
Oh, in fact, there is no typical journey of the curator, in my case, at least, because I think there are most more or less one definition of the work of curator per zoo or maybe per curator. So I can tell you my how I practice my job of curator, but maybe another someone else will have another definition of it. So
Hmm.
the journey, the everyday life can be very different, I guess, between
Okay.
institutions and people. Um, yeah. So you want me to
Yes, I mean, what actually does a zoo curator do in general? That's what the community is wondering, you know? Is a zoo curator mostly responsible for managing the animal population within the zoo? Are you also responsible for handling the workforce, like the keepers? Are you the one coordinating the feeding plans and stuff like that? How deep do you get into each species? And yeah, what does that look like? What is your expertise as a zoo curator?
Okay, so in my case, I do not manage people, so I'm not the chief of the keepers. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm like an advisor, so I can bring the biological point of view or the scientific point of view to increase the welfare or the protocols of to take care of the animals of the zoo, the reptiles and amphibians only, of course,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
also invertebrates. So that's my first task is to bring and to deliver some information, scientific informations that I can catch by reading scientific papers, by doing some meetings with my colleagues from other zoos, other curators. So
Hmm.
we are of course linked in a kind of uh, oh,
Network?
network, yeah. So, so we very often exchange between us about some questions, some projects, some issues, and so on. So that's the first point. So I'm a kind of biological advisor for the vets and the keepers. The second part is the population management of the population of the zoo. So
Hmm.
I have to sometimes find new species or find new animals for species we already have in the zoo,
Hmm.
organize the transport, the paperwork also. And I'm also working to make animal leave from the zoo to other zoo.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
have
Okay.
to find places where other zoos where people are looking for some species we have.
And where they have the capacities and
Exactly.
also the fitting couple, maybe
Yeah,
the missing
exactly.
the missing opposite. Okay.
Exactly. So it's very administrative. Okay, so it's a transport, finding animals, working with my registrar in my zoo. So we have someone who is taking care of the registers and
It's like
all
the
the
book holding,
yes,
the
I guess.
registers.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Like an
guess.
inventory.
Yeah, exactly. And she is in charge of applying for the CITES, for example, or all the papers. Yeah, so we try to spread the workload between me and her.
Hmm.
Um, I'm also managing the breeding, so I can tell this species will breed this year or not, depending of the needs and because the objective of the management of the population is not to breed every animals every year because at the end we will have and it's a good thing
You'll run
if
out
it
of
works.
space quickly. But
Yeah,
on the other hand, at least you will keep the breeding going because
yeah,
that can also be an issue. You
yeah,
know, stopping the breeding just to manage
yeah.
the population size, and then you can have start troubles to get it restarted again.
And my point, maybe we will speak about it later, but my
Hmm.
point here is to maintain the animals in breeding condition. So we still stimulate the animals, apply some climatic cycling and so on. And for animals who lay eggs, we prefer to destroy the eggs or not incubate the eggs, but maintain the cycle running instead of stopping everything and separate male and female, because it's less, at least for me, and we share it with my keepers, we don't find it very natural, so we prefer to keep it as natural as possible.
Yeah, it is a part of the natural circle of life, kind of, to reproduce. Yeah, it's a part of natural behavior, and if you take that away from the animals for years, maybe it can have an effect on them. And
exactly,
because
even if, of course, some species do not have to breed every year, so they can breed every 2 years or every 3 years. So we also have to respect this natural cycling. So we do not push the animals to breed every year and destroy the eggs. It's not the point, of course.
Okay, interesting.
So that's the second part of my job. And I have 4 parts, main parts in my job. So the first one was the scientific advising. The second one is the management of the population. The third one is more work to deliver some expertise for other institutions, or for the French authorities, for example, to identify some animals who have been
seized, for example,
exactly,
or maybe some animals that turned up in some imports of fruits. I don't know, some spiders in the banana boxes or something.
The animals kept by firemen, for example, they find a snake somewhere in an apartment, and they ask me what species it is and so on. And I'm also sometimes working in other zoos. For example, I used to work in a Rabat zoo in Morocco, because they wanted to build a vivarium there, and they were not very experienced in the keeping of reptiles and amphibians in captivity. So they asked me, and other, of course, I was not alone, to participate to the project of the vivarium of the Rabat Zoo, to train the team, to speak about the collection plan, to speak about the choice of the equipment, and so on.
Man.
So that's the expertise. Yeah, and I'm also giving courses to students in keepers school, zookeeper school.
Nice. If I read that correctly, I saw that when you started working as a curator in Paris Zoo, you were also the one being in charge for building up a reptile and amphibians collection from scratch, because if I saw that correctly, Paris Zoo hadn't had any reptilians or amphibians before. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I should have begun by this point to present the institution of Paris Zoo, because we are so Paris Zoo has been built in 1934.
Okay.
And finally, it has been closed in 2008 to be totally destroyed and totally rebuilt, because it was very old and everything was more or less falling and was very degraded. So they decided to close the zoo in 2008 and to make all the animals leave the zoo, and the animal left in other institutions. And there they worked on the new project, a new zoo, with a vivarium part, which was not existing in the older zoo. Yeah. And in fact, in Paris, there are 2 zoos: the Parc Zoologique de Paris, which is the zoo I'm working in, and there is also La Ménagerie du Jardin des Plantes, which is another zoo in the center of Paris.
That's where also there's a botanical garden or something.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And all it's in the Museum of Natural History of Paris, in the center of Paris. And my zoo, the Parc Zoologique de Paris, also belongs to the Museum of Natural History of Paris. So we are public zoo, and we are on the the hat of the Museum of Natural History of Paris.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that mean you're employed by the state?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And it makes the bridge with my fourth task in the zoo as a curator, which is more or less the task which takes me more and more time in my day, is to conduct or participate to research and conservation projects on reptiles and amphibians.
Mhm.
And that's really important for us as a zoo belonging to the Museum of Natural History of Paris to
Mhm.
make a stronger point on that part. Yeah,
To really have some efforts in the conservation work and probably also to publish some insights that were not really known before, just to improve kind of knowledge.
exactly.
So I was wondering if you are in any way also interested in what's going on in the connection of chameleons and plants in Madagascar, for example. Because just by accident, I got to know that my homie Colin, who is out there in Madagascar at the moment, he's working on his master thesis.
Exactly. Yeah.
And from what I've heard, you are his professor. Can I say that? You're
Yeah.
his
So
lecturer?
supervisor. Let's say
Supervisor.
supervisor.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, just interesting because just some weeks ago I spoke to him about some other German guy who I got to know over Facebook who is living in Madagascar and doing some conservation work in whatever way, also working in some way with chameleons from what I know. So I then spoke to this guy and connected him to Colin because they were kind of not really far away from each other, like 15 kilometers away from each other. So they also got to know in person from what I know by now. And then we spoke about what's going on here with you and everything. And that's how he said, "Oh yeah, he's my supervisor," and blah blah blah. So yeah,
What a small world.
what a small world, but interesting topic also, like the connection of plants and
Yeah.
chameleons and stuff. Maybe you can give us some insights about that.
Yeah, in fact, I have the chance to be able to develop some project ex situ, so in captivity, and also in situ, so in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now 2 years that we are working in a small reserve in Madagascar, which is called the reserve of Voimada, not far from Antananarivo. And so it's quite a small area where we have identified approximately 12 species of chameleons, which are cohabitating in the very, very small area. And it goes from the very small Brucasia to the big Parsons chameleon. Okay, so we are all the different sizes, all the different behaviors of the animals. And so the first point was to list the species, to try to know how they are distributed in the reserve. So we have we collaborate there with the students and with the guides who are working in the reserve, who spot every chameleon they find and take the GPS point.
Okay.
And also takes the micro
pictures of the microclimate or measurements,
measurements
like
of the
moisture in
microclimate,
the
UV
leaf
and
litter, for example, or whatever.
Exactly. So we try to describe on every species how do they live and where do they live. And finally, with Colin, this master student, we spoke about how, well, the guide, the Malagasy guide in the reserve always are to find the chameleons. Most of the time, they try first to find the plant because they know that in this plant they find the chameleon. And so we were very curious about it, and we say, well, we could try to build a project which will be able to understand if there is really a strong link between one species of chameleon and one type of plant. And that's why actually Colin is now there since 2 months at least, maybe 3, maybe, to try to identify the plants where essentially the Brucasia genus we try to focus on the Brucasia, to understand if they prefer a certain type of plants or not.
Interesting.
Tim,
And
what do you think about it?
And the where we want to go with this question is, if we can understand the link between the plant and the chameleon, we can then imagine how could evolve the population of the chameleon if the climate change, for example,
has an effect on the plant.
On the plant, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also maybe for reforestation projects, if you want to reintroduce or strengthen the populations, then you can actively plant the right plants to give the animals the right habitats.
Exactly.
Do you already have a theory or hypothesis, I think, on why there is a link between the species of plant and species of animal?
No, and actually we are not sure that there is
Okay.
a strong link. That's why we are trying to test. Because
so that's the first step, checking if there's a link. Okay.
Because the guides there are more or less sure of that, but we have to know if it's a kind of observation bias.
Okay.
Because,
I understand it.
Maybe they are only looking in that plant, so that they think that the plant hold the chameleons. But in fact, if you look anywhere else, you maybe will find it also. Yeah, you could
find it anywhere else. But if you don't look out there, then okay.
Yeah. So that, but yeah. So, but how could there be a link between a plant and the chameleon? It can be a link to the diameter of the branch, for example, because they need some type of
diameter to grip well.
Yeah, to grip on the branch. Maybe it's linked to the microclimate around this plant, because this plant is only growing in very, I don't know, cold and humid environment and not in other place. Maybe it's a plant more or less exposed to the UV radiation or not. We don't know, and we will be very curious about it.
Maybe it's even also like insects that prefer these type of plants.
Exactly.
And then that's the food source for the Brucasia, for example, like ant colonies or stuff that can live on or inside of the plants. Maybe lice, parasites. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. There are many possible explanations, but we have to take data to try to solve this question.
So I'm thinking the work that Colin is doing at the moment, and also like this whole conservation aspect that you're really passionate and involved in, it is something that our listeners are very interested in as well, because also we got questions about that. How can the people as young private people contribute to conservation projects, for example? We got questions like that, and I'm thinking. It sounds like the dream coming true to be working in the field in projects like that. It's like a dream coming true for a lot of people. So I'm wondering, who is paying for all of that? Like, where do the finances come from? Do you have to apply, or do you have like a certain budget from the state, or how does that work?
In my case, we are working in collaboration with an association in Switzerland, which is called Chameleon Conservation Center. So it's a Swiss association dedicated to the captive breeding and conservation of chameleons. And Sébastien Métraillé, who is the president of this association, is very active and proactive to find funds from different zoos, from different institutions, and thanks to him, we now since 2 years we managed to find enough money to work, to pay the guide in the reserve, to pay the transport for the students, to buy the equipments. Also, my zoo contributed a little bit, but not so much financially. But they give me some time to work about on this project. So I'm just contributing with my time and my expertise.
Interesting. I'm wondering, so your job has so many different aspects and things to do. What do you like most about it?
It's difficult to choose. My interest is mainly on trying to solve questions in captivity or in scientific question, but I'm very motivated to think about a problem, or why we don't manage to breed this species, or why do this animals is not doing well in captivity. So and I like to think about this kind of problem, to try to find solution, to make some tests, to read papers, to discuss with people, and to try to establish a kind of protocol and to try to solve the question. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. But this intellectual work and try to find solution is very motivated for me. And it's the same with the scientific questions. Yeah, we try to solve some.
Okay. I can imagine that is something that you can use very well in the breeding of amphibians, for example. Because I'm thinking, I'm not an expert on amphibians, I have to say, but from what I've heard, there's so many different ways in that amphibians can reproduce. Yeah, for example, like the Ophaga frogs, which only have like one or two offspring at a time, up to like clutches of hundreds and thousands of eggs. Maybe also super various like temperature conditions of like salamanders that live in caves, who are supposed to be kept at very low temperatures, and then also all the tropical species. So, speaking of interesting problems that you did solve already, give us a good example and take us along the journey of your problem solving.
Let's try to find solution we found. Well, it's not. It's very basic. But we learned, for example, how to make animals hibernate in the artificial wine cellar. So electric.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like the wine cooler.
wine cooler. Yeah,
Till has one too for his animals.
For my Elaphia carinata.
Oh yeah,
It's hibernating in there.
Okay. And for example, for amphibians or even for reptiles, we first were afraid to make some very big drops of temperature from, for example, 25 to 4 degrees. We drop at the first time 1 degree per 1 degree every 2 days, to be very slow in the drop of temperature. And finally, it was not working so well, and we make several tests, and finally we found that in the temperature zone between, let's say, 17 or 15 degrees and 8 degrees, you don't want to stay too long in this temperature, which is too hot to be a real hibernation, but not cold enough to stop every energy expenditure and so on. So we decided to shorten the time the animals stayed between 15 and 8. And finally, as first we were very afraid to make a big drop of temperature of maybe in one time 4 or 5 degrees. And finally, it's working perfectly, and everything now is very fine, and we have not lost any animals in hibernation.
Okay. That's
do you also do it the other way around? So when you're rising the temperatures back up, do you also now do a bigger step, or do you stay with raising it degree by degree?
No, when we rise the temperature, we are quite quick. Because, for example, to drive the animals from let's say 25 in ambient temperature to 4 degrees, it takes something like 10 days approximately, 10
Mm-hmm.
or 10 or 14 or something. And in the opposite, when we work up the animals, it takes maybe 5 or 7 days.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very quick.
Mm-hmm.
But we also, well, the temperature is something, but we also increase in the terrarium the basking opportunities. So first, they have only
Few
half an
hours
hour
and
or
then
1 hour of basking time, and then 2, and then 4, and so on. But yeah, when we rise the temperature, it's more rapid than when we cool the animals.
I I'm imagining it to be a huge challenge to manage a full hibernation cycle for the whole collection of the Paris Zoo. So how do you do that with all of the different habitats where the animals come from? Do you then have like a lot of like wine coolers who are set to different temperatures, or I mean it is important not to lose track of everything, right? You need some protocols for everything, like digital databases, or how can I imagine the whole process behind hibernating your whole collection?
Yeah, in fact, we have two options. The first for the animals which are not really hibernating but just have a let's say a winter rest or decrease of activity but not an hibernation, which can, for example, can be called a brumation maybe. So we use the temperature of the room. So we have some big cooling system in some room in the backstage, and we can drop the temperature to approximately between 15 and 17 degrees. So when we use, we also manipulate the time of lighting and the time of basking opportunities in reptiles, for example. So we can bring the animals to cool down, but not too cold. Only around 15 degrees. So
Mm-hmm.
for certain species, we stop there. It's enough for them, and for the real more north or east European species, which have to go through a real hibernation. We try to select species which have the same needs, or the
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
or less, and so they all go in the same wine cellar, so we can make hibernate in the same system, turtles, snakes, lizards, and amphibians. Yeah, because they all have the same needs, and we choose the species for that. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Which at the end of the day, you are responsible for then picking the species and therefore also choosing how much work you're gonna have with the whole hibernation process. So I'm thinking the whole convenience behind the care is also important for you, right? To choose animals which are a little bit like close to each other in terms of the habitat where they come from. So you can have like one base temperature and one setting of the, I don't know, lighting cycles, for example, which is probably going to be easier than having animals from a whole lot of different habitats, right?
exactly.
So you're the
The,
guy, sorry,
the,
responsible for the decision making in like selecting all the species, or is there anybody also involved in that?
Now, I can propose the species, of course, with in discussion with my colleagues, keepers, who can also propose some species, and then I can collect all the suggestions, and then I go to my director, scientific director, and I can expose which species we have in mind, and what are the pro and cons of each species, and the difficulties or not, and the interest in terms of conservation or
Mhm.
education or scientific research and display and so on. And then finally, the scientific director decide, okay, we go for this and this species, and not for this one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you manage to keep the balance between the, let's say, animals that the people want to see and the animals that are interesting for conservation?
Yeah, it's the big difficulties because sometimes it's more or less antinomic, I would say,
Yeah.
because you have some very interesting species in terms of conservation, of education, and so on, but it's absolutely not adapted to be in display in a zoo because you don't see any animals in the enclosure. For example, I don't know the to stay in Europe, the fire salamanders, for example.
Mm.
Salamandra is a wonderful species, very iconic, with a big uh, health issues in the field in Europe. I guess you already know it with the chytrid,
Mm.
which is a real problem. So there are so many things to say about the species, the conservation,
Hmm.
and so on. But if
You never see them.
of course you never see them, it's not compatible with the public. So we have to find a good balance.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
But the good thing in my zoo is that our direction uh, um, also accept for us to take animals only to keep in the backstage
Mm.
Okay.
and who are not dedicated to be in display. So we can also, and it's a real chance for us that the direction of the zoo accept us to take time and place and
Yeah,
equipment for
resources.
animals.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is it also like, are you oftentimes thinking about cohabitation? For example, if we stay with the example of the salamandra, then you could think about like housing it with, I don't know, I don't know, native frogs or fish and lizards and stuff. So just to make the enclosure more attractive.
Yeah.
So is that something that you deal with, or is it something that you're more against the cohabitation?
No, we do a lot of cohabitations in many enclosures, and yeah, the difficulty is to choose the good cohabitations and to choose the species we with enough difference in terms of ecological niche. Yeah, so we have some nocturnal and diurnal, we have some arboreal and terrestrial, um, yeah, vegetarian and carnivore and so on. But yeah, no, we have made some very nice cohabitation. For example, excuse me. We have a nice enclosure with a mix of a snake and frogs. In the greenhouse, we have
Okay.
an enclosure with Oxybelis fulgidus. I don't know if you know
Okay.
this
Okay.
species. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which
it's
frog?
with a Phyllobates bicolor.
The okay, the big ones.
Yeah. On the ground, and it's working perfectly. So you have the snake in the branches, and on
Okay.
the ground, all the golden frogs jumping everywhere, and so it's already working very well.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, interesting. Just like 2 weeks ago, Till and me and some other friends, we've been to Zoo Frankfurt. Yeah, we got a little tour behind the scenes also, met up with Johannes Köhler, who's
Yeah,
the curator for the reptiles there. And then we also spoke to the guy who's like the kind of the facility manager of the reptile house. Yeah, so they are doing like this co the job in like a cooperation. And so the guy who was running the house, he was pretty much like against like cohabitations because he felt like it was some extra work needed. You need to give more attention. They don't even have like enough staff to handle everything perfectly smoothly. So every extra attention that is needed is not perfectly in the yeah, perfectly worth it sometimes. So they have to decide, do we do the cohabitation or do we, I don't know, just take it a little bit more easy.
yeah.
And yeah, so they were a little bit more against it.
Yeah, I perfectly totally understand, and it really depends on the size of the enclosure, the time you have, the number of keepers you have. Of course,
Hmm.
I can totally understand this point. Of course.
Yeah. For example, they had like a huge enclosure with Cyclura. It was a Cyclura, which species was it? A pretty new Cyclura species from Cuba. I'm not sure which one it was. So they had some Tsuclura and some tiny masked iguanas, also from Hawaii, and it was a
Oh yeah.
pretty interesting cohabitation. Also, the little iguanas were also breeding in the huge setup, so that was pretty nice. Yeah, but yeah, I
The,
can
the,
imagine.
the only thing we try to respect by doing a cohabitation is to respect the geographic unity, I would say.
Hmm.
We won't mix, for example, South American species with Australian species, or
Hmm.
African species with European species. No, it's not our stuff. We try to respect the ecological how could I say
Habitat,
that?
the biotope.
Yeah, something coherent, ecologically coherent in
Hmm.
terms of biology and habitat, of course. Yeah,
Okay. Who is then responsible for building the setups? Like I can imagine you have these huge terrariums that you can restructure if you like. If you get some new species, then you rebuild it. And who's gonna do that? Is it a job of the zookeepers,
yeah.
or do you have like a okay, you
We have zookeepers who are very efficient doing the managing the plants, for example, and so on.
hmm.
And we have also we can have the help of the gardeners of the zoo, who are very also very helpful in the
Okay.
in the plants. Yeah.
That's probably a benefit, sorry, of like being connected to the botanical garden, right?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And in my zoo, we have a big greenhouse, so we have some uh, staff dedicated to the care of the plants in the greenhouse. So they are expert of tropical plants and so on. So we can ask for several species, and then they can give us some advice to plant the terrariums.
Okay.
And but yeah, with the experience, I have some very efficient keepers who already know what plants they want to use, how they will put them in the terrarium, and yeah. So
I can also imagine that that's like the fun part of being a zookeeper, like designing the setups that you are then responsible for. I think that's the job that the people really are happy
yeah,
about, right?
and it's not always easy to have the aesthetical part of that. So make something very nice to see, but practical for the keepers,
Mm-hmm.
because if they want to enter inside, because we have very big enclosure, so the keepers have to enter inside the enclosure for in most of them. But if they want to go at the opposite in the enclosures, they have to be able to move inside the
Mm-hmm.
enclosure
Mm-hmm.
without
Mm-hmm.
being uh, uh, yeah
Anyways, it needs to be practical.
yeah,
That's for
definitely.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, in the back here you see it's my huge setup,
yeah,
and I also tried to build like a Vietnamese forest habitat here inside of my apartment. And the setup is already pretty huge. It's like 8 square meters or something. So you can walk inside, but just until a couple of months ago, it was like only 2 meter 30 high, and I had a lot of branches inside, so I always needed to, I don't know, try to avoid getting like a branch in the eye or
yeah.
something. And now I built it up to 3 meters of height. And so I have the branches in the top and I have a lot of free space to move around it. And it is so much more easy to manage everything, to refill the water, the pond, to, I don't know, clean up something, to remove some food waste and everything. And it's just so much more practical. The enclosure design, that's important. Yeah.
And in our case, we also have an obligation to be able to count and to
Mm.
survey the population of the animals,
Uh-huh.
because we have to also to think about the visibility of the animals and the ability we will have in the future to be able to find every frogs of the terrarium if we want to do an kind of inventory of the animals. So we also have to think about it, because if you put some plants everywhere on branches and rocks and so on, you won't find any animals, or it will take hours and hours. So yeah, we have to deal with all this kind of constraints.
Yeah, especially as you are also working with like endangered species who are listed under CITES, where you are forced to monitor the populations, right? You are not allowed to take a guess, like maybe I had like five or I don't know, maybe 10 babies. I don't know. Give me some CITES paperwork.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
you need to be clear about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, oh, Till, go ahead, please. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
I think I missed something out because my internet disconnected. So I
it's fine.
oh
It's fine.
yeah.
I can give you, if you want, an example of a problem we were not able to solve because
Okay.
we were speaking about solving problems, but we still have, of course, many things we don't understand. And for example, we have one species, the crested newt, Triturus cristatus, which is a European species. And we are not able, in captivity, in total indoor conditions, we are not able to make them to breed. We can breed some alpine newts, for example, but the crested newt, impossible to breed in our case. And we absolutely don't understand why, because you maybe if you know the species, the males especially are supposed to develop a big crest on the back during the courtship and after the winter, and impossible to find the solution to make the crest grow and to obtain the courtships and so on. And we don't understand why, especially in this species, for example.
Are you
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think I heard this with some lizard species too. Maybe you know more about it, Ben. So with some, I think iguanas and agamids that also have like very big crests with
Basilisks?
the males. Yeah, basilisks. And most of the time you see much more impressive animals from the wild than in captivity. So it's interesting to see that also with newts.
And and there is, of course, something we cannot replicate in captivity because it's a local species. So maybe if we put the newts in the garden in
a pond, like
yeah, even maybe in a bucket, or maybe it will work. But in an aquarium, 10 meters from there, in a room, with an artificial hibernation and water filtration and so on. Yeah, there is something we cannot replicate, which
I'm wondering, are you successful with keeping them alive long term, even if you're not breeding them? And you're then now you're looking for the right triggers, or are you still looking for the right way to keep them alive even?
No, we managed to keep them alive during several years, but without the possibility to breed them. Of course, we I don't remember exactly, but at the start maybe we had something like 10 animals or something like that. And years after years after years, they became older and older, and finally they all died. No, we finally had only 2 females left, so we decided to make them go because, well, despite all our efforts and tests and so on, we were not able to find a solution. But I heard from a colleague from Prague Zoo, who told me that maybe he heard about something in this species especially, which can be linked to the how animals were rare during the summer before the hibernation. And if the animals were not in a terrestrial phase at least 26 degrees, then they do not reproduce. So they need a terrestrial phase with an increase of temperature to I think make some hormonal modification and so on, and then they go in hibernation, and in the spring they will breed and develop the crest. And if during the summer you don't put them at the good temperature and in the terrestrial phase, it doesn't work. So that's another hypothesis.
I'm wondering, what's the longevity of a newt like that? Do they live for like 10 years or so?
Honestly, I don't know. I think um, it has been studied with skeletochronology, I guess, but I don't have it in mind. But I would say something like 10 years maybe, something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So you mean like the newts are smart enough to realize that the climate conditions in this year are not perfect to reproduce, so we're just gonna skip a year and wait for the next year where there's more like a dry summer or whatever, which means that maybe in the next spring the chances of successful offspring is higher. So the terrestrial phase is what maybe triggers the reproduction cycle.
I'm not sure if there are a conscience or a reflection of the news on that,
Yeah,
but I'm more convinced that there is something purely physiological or hormonal.
yeah,
Yeah.
of course, that's what I meant. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, I didn't understand.
yeah, I didn't mean like they may make a conscious decision, but it's just some triggers that evolved over millions and millions of years. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
interesting.
Something different, maybe. I don't want to step too far away from the zoo topic, but I'm wondering how your work and all this scientific approach and what you learn with your work has affected your hobby keeping. So, do you still keep reptiles or amphibians at home? And did something change with your profession?
Yes, I keep animals at home since, well, I began to have animals in terrarium when I was, I would say, 10 years old. So now I'm 47. So I began at the end of the 80s to keep animals in terrarium. So yes, I saw a big evolution of the way we practice uh, keeping animals in terrarium. But now, to answer your question, is there you mean is there an influence of the fact that I work in a zoo in my personal practice at home, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So,
I don't think so. I don't think so because I try to apply the same methodology of thinking, and it's just that at home I have also smaller enclosures, um, but I'm always in the same uh, way of thinking and trying to solve problem and trying to study new species and yeah. So no, I'm not sure that it has it has changed something in my case.
So
interesting.
which species are you then working with privately? Which are the species that you're most fascinated with?
Oh, my problem is that I'm interested by more or less everything. So maybe one time I will be in love with wood lice or earthworms. So I don't know, and the next time it will be spiders, and then snakes and turtles and so on. But no, initially I was more interested by snakes and by spiders and tarantula, especially. Yeah, tarantulas. But finally, now at home, I have some geckos, some Europlatus fantasticus, for example.
Hmm.
I have some frogs, I have some snakes, and recently I obtained my license to have some venomous snakes. So I'm also beginning to think about a new orientation of my private uh, project, more on the venomous snakes. So, well, yeah, I'm interested by many things, but I have quite a small room. So, but I have a dedicated room in my house, so I don't have animals everywhere in my home because my family don't don't agree with that.
Not
Uh,
yet.
not yet.
Maybe it will change.
Yeah, so yeah, actually I have mostly snakes, but yeah, some frogs and some lizards also. Yeah.
I have heard that you used to work with the snail-eating snakes like the Parias carinatus.
Oh yeah, a
Is it
long time
true?
ago. Yeah, long time ago, and I obtained the breeding at that time, which was not so common
Uh-huh.
because it was maybe something like I would say 15 years ago or 13 years ago or something like
Okay.
that. And I used to publish a small article on how it worked at home to obtain eggs and to have the babies and so on. But yeah, it's still a very fascinating species of
Oh, oh,
snake.
yeah, all the snail-eating snakes are just fascinating in my eyes. And maybe for the listeners who don't really have an image in front of their eyes, the Pareas carinatus, they are like the diameter of a pencil, you can say, maybe like 40 centimeters long on average, I would say. So I can only imagine how tiny the babies are. And what size of snails do you even feed them? And how does the process behind that look like? Do you then need to breed snails in order to raise the baby pareas, or how does that work?
That was my main issue, in fact, and that's why I decided to stop, because I was not able to produce or to find enough very tiny snails to feed the babies.
Uh-huh.
So that was, in my case, the big limitation of that. So,
Okay.
so wait, no, in my case, I didn't breed snails by myself.
Okay.
So I had to find the snails of the good size. So I have to lift every rocks in my garden and in the middle of the summer here in France, it's not so easy to find the good size. So that was the big problem. And I never decided to breed some acatinas, for example, also
hmm hmm
but that could be an option maybe. Yeah.
But I mean, you come from France. Don't you have like snails for human consumption like
Yeah,
everywhere? And I mean,
but
there must be farms, right?
big ones. Yeah, I bet there are some farms, but the breeding is
Seasonal.
um, seasonal. Yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's not very concordant with the good timing with the babies.
Okay. Makes sense.
Oh, pretty fascinating species. I just checked in August 2023, I was in Indonesia and we also found them, and I think it was also Parias carinatus, and I was totally hyped to see them in the wild. And I didn't find any snake there. It was just the guides looking at night in the bushes, and there is one. It's totally impossible to spot them when you're not used to see them. That's very cool.
And that the only way to find animals in the field is to work with local people. They are far more efficient
Yeah.
than us. And I
Uh-huh.
see that with the chameleon in Madagascar or with other species in French Guiana, because I'm also working in French Guiana. And yeah,
Okay.
of course, people who are born there, who are from there, they see the animals they better than us. Yeah,
They just have a different eyes, maybe.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So what is going on in French Guiana then?
Many things. I used to work on caimans during several years. We with some colleagues from Vienna University. We used to work on the uh, um, uh, mercury contamination in caimans in French Guiana, because there is
Mm.
a big problem in French Guiana of pollution due to gold mining, illegal gold mining. And so I work with a colleague during his PhD. I was the co-supervisor of the PhD, and he is an ecotoxicologist. And we were trying to understand how caimans were contaminated with mercury, and what could be the consequences for the populations of caimans in the field. So it's
hmm
totally disconnected from the captivity. So it was only purely conservation and ecology.
And the caimans are the right species because they are like the top of the food chain, and that's where all the how do you say mercury then collects kind of because it stays in the system of the animals, right? In the liver, maybe?
Yeah, in the liver, in the brain, in the blood, in the fats also. So it can stay more or less everywhere. And yeah, you are totally right. They are on the top of the food chain, so they are bioaccumulator of all the pollutants that are firstly kept by the plants, and then some fishes, and then and so on. And at the end, you have the caimans. Yeah. So we used to work on it, and we also used to work on. We still are working on it. We are monitoring a small population of Paleosuchus trigonatus, which is a dwarf caiman from French Guiana. And we are trying to understand how do they live, because it's very curious to see that there is this small species of caiman who is living in an area where you would not suspect a caiman could live. I mean, it's in the closed forest, in quite more relatively cold water. They are mostly in caves or in burrows in the banks of the small streams in the forest, with very poor access to the sun, so they cannot thermoregulate. And we, since 2016, we are going there years after years after years to capture the animals, to put some transmitter inside, and to know how they move, to identify the animals, to know how they grow, and so on and so on. And we try to understand how this very strange caiman can live in such a weird habitat, considering classical crocodilians.
But the same species, it can also be found like in typical caiman habitats, right? Or is it like specific to this species to be in these cold forest areas?
But in fact, in this typical forestal species of caimans, you only have this one. And you have the two species of Paleosuchus.
Okay.
Yeah. You have the Paleosuchus palpebrosus and trigonatus. And in the field, we observe that the trigonatus is more deep in the forest, and whereas the Paleosuchus palpebrosus is more on the edge, so he's more flexible. Maybe in this type of habitat, you can find it in more open areas, whereas the trigonatus is more in dense and very shady areas in the forest, inside the forest. So it asks many questions about how do they feed, how do they thermoregulate, how do they breed. We have found a nest, for example, in the forest, and we were lucky enough to be there at the time of the hatching of the babies, 2 times in the same nest.
It was it also like a, can I imagine it like a compost where like the decomposing of the plant materials generates some heat for the incubation? Is it like that?
Yeah. We have not measured any specific temperature inside the nest, but it was at the end of the incubation time, so maybe it was too late. I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of a mount of vegetation at the just next to the trunk of a big tree, and we have found in activity the same nest at the same place. Sorry, 2 times with a baby. Just and the baby just have to walk maybe let's say 10 meters, and they are directly in the stream, just next to this mount. Yeah. So that's an example of what we do. And more recently, we also on snakes. This time we have done some radio tracking on Corallus hortulanus. I don't know the common name in English. Maybe garden boa.
Garden boa, I think. Yeah.
And so thanks to a colleague in French Guiana, we managed to follow 4 females during 15 months in the forest.
Okay.
So we were able to track them during more than 1 year to understand how do they move, at what temperature they are, and what is the home range of the animals. That was very interesting to collect this type of natural history data to understand how animal lives. So that's my particularity in terms of research, because I have a PhD in biology, so usually I'm during my university studies, I used to ask some more theoretical questions about biology and try to answer this question by imagining some um, uh, uh, experimental settings and so on. And now, as I'm not working in a big lab, I'm just working in a zoo. I can now focus only on not on big questions in biology, but only on the description of the natural history of the animals.
Which
And
is,
I think it's very important
yeah,
to understand how our animal lives, because when you understand them in the field, of course, you better understand them in the captivity, and that's the point.
that's for sure. Yeah, yeah. That's also like an idea that we try to promote with the podcast, this scientific based husbandry.
Yeah,
So,
I used to watch this podcast
oh,
just before.
nice. Okay,
Yeah,
what did you think about it?
yeah, it was fantastic, very interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, very cool.
Glad
Yeah,
to hear
because
that.
at the end of the day, we are still hobbyists, but we're really trying to do our best and try to evolve the hobby as far as we can. Yeah, so I think it's always important to understand the what is fundamentally true about the animal and then fill the gaps with what you think is right. And that's how you can get the best base, kind
yeah.
of.
And I think one crucial point, and you used to speak about it in various podcasts before me, but I think the understanding of the microhabitat and the microclimate is a revolution. In fact,
Hmm.
mixing the behavior with the climate, local climate,
Hmm.
is crucial to my point of view to understand how to keep animals in captivity. Because it's not because an animal lives in the arid and hot area
Of
that,
Morocco.
for example,
Yeah.
that he will need or he will be able to to support, or not to support, but to live in a dry and hot area. Maybe he will try to hide in a burrow, which of course it will be cooler and with higher humidity. And if you don't understand the behavior and how the animals use this habitat, you can be totally false. And yeah, and that's very the key for me to understand this the precise data on the natural
Hmm.
history of the species.
Yeah, that's why I gave the like little example of Morocco, because when I'm thinking of Morocco, I'm always thinking of some arid areas, desert-like savanna areas, but at the end of the day, it's not really true, right? Morocco is so diverse.
Yeah,
We have some friends, also Colin, and another friend of his, it's Rayan,
yeah,
and they used to go to Morocco pretty frequently, and we always see the habitats they are posting, and they have amazing waterfalls and lake sites and everything. It's so
yeah,
beautiful that yeah, you really need to understand where the animals really come from.
yeah.
And I think the best thing that you can do is book a flight and try to find them in the wild to get a best possible understanding.
It's not always easy and possible for everyone, but the more yeah, as soon as you can do it, I think we have to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and take data from the field, not just
Hmm.
observation, but you
Hmm.
have to. But it's my scientific
Approach.
bias, but approach. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I always want to measure things to collect data to understand.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I think it's also a cool approach to try to connect to the local conservation programs. If you are very passionate about a certain type of animals, genus, species, whatever, then try to find like a local conservation program that you can maybe link up to. Maybe you can just ask those people for data, or you can connect and move over there, meet the people in person, build a relationship, and also try to help them in whatever way you can. So,
Absolutely. Mm.
yeah, I'm thinking everybody will be happy to have some funding in terms of money, but maybe they also just need some hardware, some equipment. Maybe you can send them like an iPhone if it's not really easily available in French Guiana. I'm not sure what's the situation like over there. But for example, I'm connected to the Endangered Primate Rescue Center in Vietnam. It's like a station that takes care of the primates, the monkeys of Vietnam. And for example, when I went there to visit them, they asked me to bring like these wild cameras, these wild camera traps,
Yeah.
because they are just not available in Vietnam in this quality that we need, to make them last in the forest. So, do you have any like tips for the listeners who want to like have a good impact on conservation? Do you have like a tip what those people can do? Like, yeah.
You mean linked with the captivity on
Yeah,
yeah?
so I'm just trying to give you like an image. So there's like a 18-year-old guy super passionate about crested geckos, breeding them at home, having like a couple of babies, and he thinks that he wants to have a good impact on the species and not only on his personal animals, you know? What can this guy do?
I think the first thing we can do as private keepers is to learn to breed our animals and to breed our animals to be autosufficient in terms of production of animals. So we have to, of course, to stop to import animals from the wild. The wild is not an endless source of biological resources. Now everybody is, I hope, aware of it. But not so far ago, so long time ago, we were still taking some, I don't know, ball pythons from Togo, thousands and thousands of animals, and it's not, it's we cannot do it anymore. So we have, as a private keeper, we have the responsibility of taking care of the captive population. So we have to manage the population as a closed population. So we have to be connected all together to exchange animal, to track the animals, to know the pedigree of the animals, to avoid inbreeding, and to try to maintain a maximum of genetic diversity. And yeah, it's not always easy, or maybe private keepers think that they cannot participate or they cannot act on this point. But I think if everybody who has animals at home has a good tracking of the animals, and also take care about taking data also, because each of us can be a source of information in captivity, to understand how they breed, how they grow, how they feed, and everybody can bring a part of knowledge based on its own capacity. So of course, everybody can do and practice herpetoculture as he wants, but I think we are managing a big source of knowledge as private keepers. So we have to be proactive in that sense. But maybe it's my scientific vision of the hobby. But yeah,
I understand it. I'm wondering, where do we collect the data? I'm sure there, for the moment, there is not, but maybe there should be like a central like pool for all the data, like one software platform where everybody can put in the weights and the reproduction cycles, and
that would be fantastic. And as very basic information, most of the time we don't know what is the mean lifespan of a species, for example. How long do a normal Pogona viticeps lives, for example? We don't know. We don't know. Everybody has some Pogona viticeps, but well, they die, but we don't really know the age, and maybe we have a baby, so we know the date of birth, but maybe 2 years after the animal will leave your breeding facility and go in elsewhere, and we will lose the track of the animals, and at the end we lost all the data, and we don't know how long was his life at the end. And so that's very basic. Or the number of eggs per clutches, for example. sometimes you can find it in the literature, but the
Mhm.
more we have data, the more we can have a precise idea of
Mhm.
the size of the clutch, depending on the age of the female, for example,
Mhm.
the size of the length of incubation, depending on the temperature. So we can, every of us, I think, as soon as we have animals in captivity, we can collect this kind of data. Okay, how many eggs I had, what was the date, and maybe at what temperature I incubated the eggs, and when did they hatch, and take it in a small I don't know, an Excel sheet, or I don't know. And
Mhm.
but you are totally right. The difficulty is to mix
Collect, yeah.
to collect all this information. But it's, to me, it's very
Yeah,
important.
would
Yeah.
be cool to link like the zoo world, the scientific world, and the private keeper world together, because oftentimes us as a private keeper often hear that it's difficult to link and cooperate with zoos, and maybe also the zoos think it's difficult with most private keepers. It would be cool to stick together with
Yeah,
also collecting data.
yeah. And there are more and more initiative in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, private keeper are collaborating with zoos, and zoos are asking private keepers to bring their knowledge and their expertise on several species, because finally at the end, uh, the one of the best animal keepers I know are not in the zoo world. They are private keepers, because they are more specialists of precise species, which are not present in any zoos in the world.
Mm.
And most of the time, the best the better knowledge is the propriety of the private keeper, more than the zoo, or at least at the same level. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I think especially in the reptile and amphibian world, you can really see that. I'm mostly interested in small mammals, and that's where really the zoo world is, in my eyes, still far ahead, like compared to the private keepers, but especially with the small species that you can keep in like terrariums at home. There's people who specialize in species or genuses who do an incredible job. It's really insane. Yeah, so for example, we also got this one question like how do I as a private person can cooperate with a zoo and exchange animals? So yeah, I'm thinking there it's a huge and a difficult topic probably also because of the breeding programs
Yeah.
which regulate like the ownership of the animals. But I'm sure there's also animals that are free to not listed under CITES and also not listed in the breeding programs. So what is your experience on cooperations with private people?
In fact, the main difficulty we have working with private keepers is mainly two things: is the knowledge of the precise pedigree of the animals. So
Sorry, what is
sometimes
that?
the
Pedigree?
pedigree, what was the identity of the parents, and
Okay.
so the family tree of
Mm-hmm.
the animals, and where do they come from exactly. And we because to preserve a maximum of genetic diversity, and to avoid any, or the most more to avoid as much as possible the inbreeding of the animals, we have to to know where the animals comes from. And unfortunately for many private keepers, they buy animals on shows, or they exchange with other keepers, but we have lost the traceability of the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, for us, that could be a problem. And the second problem is could be the quarantine and the health screening on the animals, because as we don't know where the animals come from, etc. So it's always quite frightening to make this kind of specimen enter
Your closed collection
a
behind the
close.
scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's not impossible to. There are ways, of course, to be sure of that. And more we are involving private keepers in this kind of project. For example, we several years ago in the amphibian tag of the European Association of Zoo and Aquaria, we made a revision of the regional collection plan, which is the a collection plan is in the zoo world is the list of the priority species which we as an institution encourage our zoo to keep. To avoid the species which have no sense to be kept in zoos, and to encourage zoos to focus more on that species or that species because there is needs in terms of conservation, education, research, and so on. And so we had to, for example, we had a specific meeting on West Palearctic chordata, so all the newts and salamanders from Europe, let's say. And we organized a 2 days meeting in which we focused on every species one by one, naturally present in Europe, to know which species can be kept in zoos and which one is a priority or not. And we, in this meeting, we invited some private keepers for them to share their experience, which species can be kept, which species can be bred, are there more or less present in the hobby, in the private keepers world. And so in that sense, we invited some private keepers to share their knowledge and their very precise knowledge on this kind of animals, for example. So it's an example of.
And did that also did you also then start a cooperation with these private salamander and newt experts, which then maybe gave some founder animals to your zookeeping populations, or how did that work?
Not in that case. But we would be absolutely open to it. The only thing is that we decided some new programs on this kind of chordata, and until now the programs are still under constructions. So we still have to know what we want to do, how we want to do it. But at the end, of course, if we find some private keepers who had some animals of interesting species which are not suspected to be hybrids, or which are very precisely determined with good health screenings, of course we are totally open to work with private keepers, but because, as I said earlier, they are really, really very efficient.
So how do you expect like a private keeper to reach out to you, for example? Are you open to receive messages on Facebook or Instagram, or do you prefer like emails, or how do you wish to get in touch with people?
Yeah, so I'm not deciding everything, and I'm not in charge of everything. So, but I can, of course, connect people. So it's important to connect people. Social media are very good for that. So I have a Facebook page and Instagram page.
I think Sorry, I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid of, to get in personal touch. And we oftentimes hear that, I'm thinking it is not possible to work with the zoo people. But then I'm asking, okay, did you ever send a message? Did you ever ask? And then it's like, no, but I'm sure they will say no.
No. I'm not saying that it will be easy and it will be yes every time, of course. But it's always very fun to speak about it, to exchange, and for people to understand why it's not possible, or why it's possible. And it helps also the private keeper to, okay, so at this point I cannot participate because of that. But okay, so if I want to improve myself, and in the future collaborate. I can
This
work
is the
on.
way to go,
Yeah.
for
So
example. Yeah.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. And then there's also this big topic of the breeding programs. Yeah, which is probably then more close to the private people, the EEPs. I'm sure, yeah, there's also like EEPs obviously for reptiles and amphibians and so on. Do you have any experiences of private holders incorporating in these programs?
Yes. For example, the husbandry guidelines. So the guidelines, you know what is husbandry guidelines in the
But you can
zoo?
explain for the listeners if you
Yeah.
like.
So husbandry guidelines is a big document which make a point on one species or sometime in one genus about what do we know on this species, let's say in the field, in the nature, and what do we know in captivity. And it's a kind of Bible of what we know of the species, and it will help everybody we will want to have the animals in captivity in zoo to have the good informations. And most of the time, for every species we have in a breeding program for conservation, the first step is to write this document. And for example, in my case, I'm the coordinator of the Agalicnis morleti EEP. So it's a black-eyed tree frog from Central America. And to build this document, I used to co-write or to invite some private keeper to write this document with me. So it was the first collaboration. It was only theoretical because I did not accept animals from the private keepers until now, but maybe it will be the case in the future. And if I'm not I don't want to say something wrong, but I think that, for example, in Iguana delicatissima, which is the iguana in Antilles, some animals already in the program, the EEP program in Europe, came from a private, I guess it's a German guide, private keeper of iguanas. And I guess there is a very close collaboration with this guy, for example. Yeah.
Interesting.
But until now, finally, there are quite very few EEP programs on reptiles and amphibians compared to the number of species we should take care of. So we are only in the beginning. So yeah. Actually, we have very few examples, but I'm sure that in the future we will increase the capacity and the collaboration with, of course, with private keepers.
Yeah. So you spoke about like this priority lists within these tags, the taxon advisor groups. Yeah. So these EEPs, are they started like from the highest to the lowest priority? So like the animals that are high on the priority list, they are the first one being like represented in an EEP? Is it how that goes?
Yeah, more or less. So we have, for example, we choose a list of species. For example, the dendrobatic frogs, for example. So we take all the species of belonging to this family of frogs, and one by one we can analyze what do we know according to IUCN Red List. What do we know about the status in the field? What do we know about our ability to take care of it in captivity? How many animals are in the private sector? How many animals in the zoos, and so on? And then we make a rank of the species, and we decide, for example, for this one and this one and this one, we will propose the creation of a new program, a new EEP. And for other, we will only propose, for example, a monitoring program. So it's not as strong as an EEP, but it's species for which we think that it's important to to
Keep an eye on
record
them.
the data and to manage very closely the population. And for other species, we will say, okay, it's better to stop to have this and this and this species. So we can say that these species are phase out. So we have to stop to having it in captivity because there are too many animals represented.
And you need the resources
Exactly.
to focus on another.
So that's not saying that if you have this species phase out, you have to get rid of the animals. You can keep them. But if you are a new institution wanted to have amphibians, for example, please don't choose this species, but more focused on this one, which is an EHP or a monitoring program, for example. So it's kind of help of the decision.
Okay.
Can you give us some insights on the priority list, or is it like close to the public?
It's finally, I don't know if it's really secret, but it's not published officially because it's more a list, a tool, a zoo tool to take decision. So it's not very useful finally for private keepers, just for curiosity to know what species have been chosen. But as it's a work document helping us to make decisions. So I think that's why this kind of document is not often easy to find on the web, for example. But I'm not sure it's secret. I don't know why it would be secret. I don't.
So with these conservation programs, like the breeding programs, do you see any realistic chance of the animals ever being reintroduced back into the natural habitats? For example, I know of these examples of the native turtles, like the emis, for example, Emis orbicularis, and also recently I've been to the zoo in Zagreb, and they are involved in a breeding program of their native turtle. I think it's a Mauremis species. I'm not so sure about it. And they are actively reintroducing them back into the wild, but they are native species. So do you see any chance of us reintroducing substantial amounts of animals back into the tropical habitats anytime soon?
Yeah, we have some example, more and more examples, but the difficulty now is that you can only reach the reintroduction phase of a conservation program if you have identified the threat, if you have found the solution to eliminate the threat and restore the habitat, because most of the time the problem is that the habitat is degraded. And so the problem is that most of the time we have identified the threat, but we are not able to fix it in the field. So we are not ready to release the animals, because if you release a fish in the pond where there is no water, you can release as fishes as you want. Of course, it will be a fail. And that's the main problem. But more and more, we have some examples of population reinforcement, for example, or clearly a reintroduction. But it takes very, very, very long time to reach this. For example, there is a frog, which is I guess the oldest EP of the EASA is the mountain chicken frog, Leptodactylus, which is the name of the species, Leptodactylus phallax. Sorry, native from Montserrat in Central America, and I think the program began thanks to Jersey Zoo and maybe London Zoo also, and after Chester Zoo in England. And I think it began maybe 15 years ago or something. And the first release of animals in the field are now, maybe last year or the year before. But it took 15 years to understand the threat, try to find a solution to breed the animals in captivity because they were more or less all dead in the field, and try to fix the field and to restore the habitat, build some enclosure, and then begin to release the first animals under very, very strict monitoring, because the importance and the difficulty during the reintroduction programs is that reintroduction is not only you take animals from captivity, put them in the wild, and problem solved. No, you have to monitor the animals to understand what is the mortality rate of the reintroduced animal, what is the breeding rate of the animals, how do they spread, how do they move in the field, and so you have to build some indicators of success or failed of what you've done, and maybe have some correction of the methodology and so on. For example, for amphibians, you also have to take care of the restoration of the microbiome, so the bacterial population on the skin of the frog.
Man, okay.
Yeah, because in captivity, we know that this natural population of bacteria are decreased in captivity, and they are very helpful in the field to
boost the immune system.
Yeah, and to combat some fungus or some viruses or bacteria and so on.
Okay.
So you have to check that and to be sure that the animals are strong enough. It's like a microbiota inside the intestine, for example. But in the case of the frog, it's also on the skin of the frog.
Okay.
So there are many things to check and to be sure before reintroducing the animals in the field. So.
And I can also imagine that you need to be super careful not to introduce some new viruses into the wild that maybe came from zoo population where all the animals all the species are mixed, and
exactly.
Okay.
And that's there are many screenings and many insurance also on the determination of the animals, because if you release some hybrids of or a subspecies which has not been well identified in captivity, so we have to be very careful. But we have more and more examples on invertebrates, for example. There are very nice programs with snails in Central America, led by Chester Zoo. There are also some very nice programs with frogs in Australia. So they are not an EASA institutions, but they are doing a very nice job of releasing animals in certain part of Australia. So we have more and more good example of success, but it's a very long process.
Yeah. Oftentimes we hear that we hear things like, yeah, the animals are never gonna be reintroduced back into the wild. See how it is not done today, so obviously it will not be done in the future. And I'm thinking, maybe it's just hopeful, but I'm thinking we need to be a little bit more positive and we need to have a longer view of everything. And maybe we are at the moment not in the phase where the reintroduction is done so much, but maybe we are working our way towards the right goal, but the public doesn't see it for the moment.
Yeah.
And
most people aren't aware of everything that's happening in the background, maybe.
Yeah, and of course, it's a very long process. So we have to be patient, because doing wrong things in terms of reintroduction can be worth that doing nothing. So we have to be very careful of what do we release, how we release, in terms of, as you say, the pathogens and many things. So yeah, it's a very long process, but the actual responsibility for us, I mean for the zoo community, is to keep our animals preventing inbreeding and keeping a maximum of genetic diversity. So that's the main goal of our methodology of keeping animals in captivity. And as soon as you have a captive population very healthy with a nice genetic diversity and so on, you have time then to be sure that in the field everything will be okay and release animals. But the first thing is to fix the captive population, to be sure that we are doing the good thing.
Yeah. And that's still a problem to be solved for a lot of species, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we are working. In my case, I have involved in a new project of research about assisted reproduction technology in amphibians. So, for example, cryopreservation of sperm to make some artificial inseminations in captivity for species who are not for which we are not able to breed in captivity, or also to bring some genes from the field, but without catching the animals from the field and bringing them in Europe. So we only collect sperm, for example, freeze it in the field, and then bring it back in Europe. And in the lab, we can mix fresh
man, that's future
eggs.
shit.
Never thought about that, but yeah.
And it's very, very more and more used in this kind of program. So it's a way to preserve genetic diversity without too much disturbing animals in the field, but keeping in captivity a kind of good sample of the natural genetic diversity.
And that's crazy.
Cool.
Wow.
I mean, it's logical, but I never heard of it or thought of it. Super cool.
And it's more and more involved in the captive breeding programs and conservation programs. Yeah.
Okay.
But we have many things to learn on that side also.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That can be done for amphibians now, but also for other classes of animals too. Like
recently they did it on a snake in a zoo in US. I think it was on the Pituophis. I don't remember the species, but they made a publication several weeks ago. It was the first artificial insemination of a female with a sperm from a wild collected animals.
Okay.
And they produce babies.
That's insane.
So without natural copulation, but it's a way to produce animals with good genetic value in captivity.
Man, I've never even thought about it. Like, I've never thought about that it is even a possibility.
And you can freeze, for example, the sperm. You can freeze the sperm during 200 years.
Yeah.
And at the end, it will work exactly
also
the
so
same.
much more easy to transport and everything. Yeah,
I just checked. I think it was Pituophis rudveni, and they inseminated 6 females with the semen of 6 male donors from the wild, and they had 2 fertile clutches.
Okay.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just had
Insane.
to check.
Okay. Pretty wild. Till, do you have any more questions in mind?
Oh, I have so many more questions, but I think we could have a talk forever. Yeah, but
I'm very sorry for my very poor English, so I hope the listener will understand what I want to say, because sorry about that.
Your English is great, and it's the second language for all of us, so it's perfectly fine. I'm thinking the one last question that I would really like to get into is imagine like this young guy who is really interested in biology and animal keeping and the zoo world and everything, and he wants to get his hands on the animals, but I don't know, he's not sure if just being a zookeeper is enough for him. He's thinking about becoming a curator, if that's a possible career for him. What is a typical way to become a curator? And which options are there? Is it studying biology? Is it being a zookeeper, doing a great job and leveling up from there? Is it, I don't know, something else? What is the career path?
As I said at the beginning, there are many ways, many ways to practice the work of curator, and many ways to become a curator. But as far as I know, more or less, the majority of the curator I know are from the university studies. So they have at least a master or a PhD. So, but sometimes you can be also veterinarian. But yeah, most of the time the curator has a biological background in the university. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the best way to reach this kind of position. But yeah, you also have to keep in mind that not all the zoos have curators. Sometimes you don't have curators, or sometimes the curator is only take care of the registering take the list, the inventory of the animals. So you just count the animals coming and count the animals dying, and how animals are born, and so on. So the way you practice the sorry, the way you practice the work will depend on the institution we work in. So, but yeah, I think the biological studies are a good step. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I've also heard that there are, okay, let me start differently. There are also projects working with breeding programs outside of the EASA, like, for example, citizen conservation.
Yeah.
And they also just very recently had like a job offer to become a curator at citizen conservation. And you did not even have to have a scientific background. It was okay to be just super passionate about whatever you're doing, and it was still possible to get the job. So maybe that's also an option, you know,
Yeah, it
to
can
think
be.
outside of the EASA.
It's always the same. It depends of what you want the curator to be in charge of. So yeah, but I think if you are in charge of taking care of the management of a captive population, you should have at least some knowledge about genetic, some knowledge about the population genetic, for example. And I think it's, but yeah, it depends of what you want the curator to do. So yeah, but yeah, citizen conservation is doing a very impressive job, and mixing private and zoo,
professional.
and it's really perfect, and they managed to develop some amazing programs on frogs, for example, on Atelopus, Balios, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, we would like to have the people from citizen conservation on here on the podcast, but for the moment we didn't have any personal contact to them yet. Do you have anybody for us? Do you have like a contact? Or
yeah, I can give you some contact. Yeah, of course.
That would be nice. Yeah.
And I'm sure they would be. Oh well, I don't want to speak for them, but they should be very happy to speak with you, because they really want to promote the collaboration between zoo, private keepers, and scientists. So yeah, they are in the middle of that, and yeah, that's very interesting.
Sounds like it's the next step to take for us to invite those.
I think so too.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing, Olivier. Is there anything left that you want to say to the listeners, or do you have any questions for us?
No, I think we have. I've tried to speak as clearly as possible, and it's. I hope, I managed to understand to answer your question as clearly as possible, and now I think we have covered many subjects already.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot
for your expertise, for your patience.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure, and it was the first time in English for me in the podcast. So
great,
very nice experience.
You did great,
and thank you for what you are doing. I love the way you are doing your podcast, and the topics you are developing and so on, and the time we have to speak, and it's very very nice to see this kind of work. So congratulations to all
Thank
of you.
you. Yeah, we always try to really
Thanks.
add some value for the keepers. So we try to answer their questions. That's why we also speak to our audience. And yeah, we are looking to get the scientific approach on the show, you know. And yeah, so thank you for being here. Anything left to say too?
Yeah, Olivier, if people want to see what you're doing, are you also active on the social medias? Do you have an account you want to share that we can link under the in the description of the podcast?
Yes, I have. I'm more active on Facebook, but I know that it's more and more for old people. Facebook, it's not, but I'm more active on Facebook to. I'm not necessarily speaking about what I'm doing, but I'm sharing many information. I'm trying to share some publications, some news, something. So yeah, on Facebook, we can follow me, and also Instagram. Yeah, and it's my name, Olivier Marquis.
Yeah, I think I've found the Instagram. Ben is already
We
following.
will link everything in the description.
We will link it. And yeah.
Okay, so let's have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, best wishes to Paris, and hopefully we will meet up in person anytime soon.
With pleasure. If you come in Paris, please let me know.
We will for sure. Okay, have a sweet evening.
See you soon.
Thanks
everybody.
a lot.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye.